Well, welcome to High Cheese with Darren Maloney. Today is Friday, April 15th, 2022. And today is Good Friday. And for anyone that wants to take a quick refresher course on what went on today, 2,000 years ago, I'd recommend you just reading the Gospel of John 15 through 20, maybe a little past that. And, maybe it'll take 15, 20 minutes, but it will be good reading on a day like today. So with that said, I just want to switch to Elon Musk. So Elon has put in a bid to buy Twitter for $54 a share and a total amount of about $43 billion. Now let's put this into perspective for Elon. Elon right now is worth anywhere between $270 billion plus. So it's a decent amount of money for him. For most Americans, it would be like buying a car. So Elon's car is going to be Twitter. And for those who just don't know about Twitter, Twitter is a mass social media site that has become the world's public square. Now, everybody that has access to Twitter can make comments and post them. They can set up their own account and post them. And what's happened is both the media and the political realm of our society has taken onto Twitter as a driver to set either a national narrative or any other type of narrative that is important today. Now, quite frankly, I don't believe in narratives, but the media does. And I like the idea of Musk buying Twitter. Now, you got to understand about Musk. Musk does business with China, makes a lot of money from China. And he is also delving into transhumanism in the sense that he's looking into it. And he's well aware of the downsides of transhumanism, but he is still looking into it. So he's not perfect. But with that said, I think that anything that would hurt Twitter at this point would be helpful to us. Now, remember, Twitter is the social media site that banned Donald Trump indefinitely and banned the New York Post from spreading the Hunter Biden laptop story prior to the election in 2020. So they are up and down that organization. They have management that is anti-free speech, anti-conservative, anti-you and me. And to me, anyone that comes in that will change that, I'm 100% behind. Now, some out there, they say, well, Twitter's doing a slow death. And the interesting thing is that the stock price today of Twitter is relatively the same price that it was when it initially had its IPO. I think it was in 2013. So if you bought into Twitter in 2013, you really haven't had that much of a return. And it's kind of telling us that Twitter is just meandering along. Wall Street does not like what Twitter is all about as far as their management. So it's just there. Now, some people say, well, it'll just have a slow death because of the way it's run. It's anti-free speech, anti-American. But I can't wait. You can't wait for that. Because this slow death can take years and years and years. Now, there's alternate platforms that have come up. There's Getter, Parler to an extent, and Truth Social, Trump's site. So there is competition forming, but I still think that Twitter, with Elon Musk at the head, will become a free speech site. He'll likely get rid of all the management that is communist and anti-American, and all these woke employees that banned Trump, banned the New York Post. So if Musk can come in and buy Twitter, I think that's a good thing. Now, what's happened is he he presented the board with a share price of $54. Now, the board is meeting right now. Well, the board met yesterday, Thursday. Today is Friday, to contemplate what to do. Now, there's several things they can do. They can accept the offer. They can come back with a counter offer, or what they can do is also they can shoot themselves in the foot, and it's called a poison pill. Essentially, what a poison pill does is the board will issue all these new shares, and they will ban Musk from buying these shares in order to dilute his impact and the value of what he can do with the number of shares he owns. So if you flood the market with the additional shares and you ban Musk from buying these new shares, currently Musk owns about 9% of the company. So all these new shares out there, you dilute the 9% that Musk owns. Now, an unintended consequence of this is that you just drive down the share price tremendously. And I don't think the current stockholders would be quite happy with that. Now, the other thing they can also do, they can hope that maybe somebody like George Soros can come in and buy this company. Now, one thing you have to understand from that, for as wealthy as George Soros is, or as wealthy as Jeff Bezos is, they come nowhere near the wealth of Elon Musk. So I don't know if anyone wants to get into this kind of battle with Musk. Because I'm not sure that this thing is all about getting a return for Elon Musk. I think a lot of it has to do with he's a free speech guy, and he's going to use his wealth to steamroll that board. And they have a tough decision to make because they have fiduciary responsibility. Now, what fiduciary responsibility? And I can tell you, before I retired, one of my positions, I had fiduciary responsibility for some of our employees with their retirement plan or deferred compensation plans. So I had a responsibility to them to make the best financial decision, not based on me, but I had a responsibility to make a financial decision based on their benefit, not mine, their benefit. So this board also has a responsibility, not to themselves, but to the stockholders of Twitter. So if they come in and just say no out of spite, they can get sued. Now, Jim Cramer said a few days ago, well, if they accept it, they can get sued because they have fiduciary responsibility. But I think you're wrong, Jim Cramer. Well, let me tell you, historically, the price that Musk is offering is well above what the average price of this stock has been since its inception. You take a look at what it was in 2013 to what it is today, it really hasn't moved. So we'll see what happened. The board hasn't come back. The one thing that Elon can do if they don't accept, he'll just dump his stock. And he'll just drive that Twitter price down even more than it is today. I think right now it's trading about $43. Market's closed today. But if he just dumps his stock, that stock's going to collapse. So we'll see what happens. Again, I like the idea because if they're rational on the board, the future does not bode well for them. They've got competition from the likes of Getter, Truth Social, Parler. They'll likely be facing a potential breakup once the Republicans take over in November. So it may be in the best interest of everyone that they sell to Elon. So we shall see. Okay, I want to switch to the shooting in the New York City subway this past week. They caught the shooter. His name is Frank James, and this is from the New York Post. They said the suspect of the New York subway shooting was arrested on April 13th and charged with terrorism. Frank James, 62, was stopped at 1:42 p.m. at the corner of St. Mark's Place and First Avenue in Manhattan. says a tipster alerted police to James' location, but the tipster was James himself. Look, the New York City cops are really good. And the New York City terrorist squad is really good. Dollars to donuts, they're better than the federal governments. Just my opinion. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about YouTube right now. And I want to spin this about me. Now, they've looked at, some people have looked at James's YouTube account. And he has ranted things about violence, used racial epithets against white people, against Hispanic people. I guess in a linked YouTube account, he made death threats against humanity in general. And why am I a threat to YouTube? Now, in a prior episode, I mentioned that YouTube took down episode 16 of my podcast. And they told me that I was speaking about the election, and I can't talk about the election and how it was fraudulent. So they took me down, and I'm talking about YouTube. So YouTube took me down and have shadow banned me, which essentially means they make it extremely difficult for anyone to find me on YouTube. Yet they keep this terrorist account alive. Why is that? Tell me, why is that, Mr. YouTube? I don't have an answer. All I can tell you to my listeners, at some point, my YouTube listeners should slowly move over to the other platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher. But this is the problem with high tech today, and this is the problem with Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all the other platforms. And this is one of the reasons that I think Elon Musk should buy Twitter. But anyway, that's not why I am talking about this. What I just want to talk about also is that this entire narrative about white supremacists being a threat to the United States. And I think it was Christopher Wray, the FBI director, said in a hearing a number of months ago that white supremacy is the number one threat to the United States. And this is the problem that we have today. We've got a merger of government, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the media, and politicians working against us. Now, I can tell you the FBI is corrupt. I've had, again, I mentioned in the past, I've had a dear friend from a number of years ago was a former FBI agent, and he had to leave. It was just becoming corrupt. Now, the agents aren't corrupt. Most of them are very good, hardworking people. It's the people up in the C-suite. It's the higher-ups that are trying to curry favor with the politicians. They're the ones that are corrupt. Same thing with the Department of Justice. And this is why we've got the Attorney General threatening parents at Board of Education meetings. But anyway, this whole thing about white supremacy being a threat to the United States or being the number one threat, that whole narrative is just collapsing. Because as we're seeing, and in this case with the subway shooter, he's African American. And if you notice, a lot of the hate crimes against Asian Americans in New York City have been African Americans. Now, I am not saying that African Americans are a threat to society. However, the problem is that if these people that were doing hate crimes against Asian Americans were white, it would just feed into this narrative that the media, the government, and politicians have been pushing. And here's a perfect example. It says here, there was this, I guess it's a former MSNBC host. His name was Torre. And I guess he's not there anymore. But he tweeted out when made a tweet, and when he found out that the shooter in the New York City subway was black, all he could say is "damn, damn, damn." And you know why he said that? Because it just undermines this whole entire narrative that terrorism only comes from white people, white men, which is totally absurd. But they will keep it up. And they will continue to keep it up until November. On so many levels. I've said on a number of occasions that this time between now and November's election are extremely dangerous for this country. And we see the left falling apart with its narrative against you and me and against people of all races. Because if they can single out, if you get this left-wing cabal singling out anyone and let them get away with it, whether it's white people, black people, any people, you're next. But they're going to continue to try to do this. And I just want to parlay this into a study from the University of Georgia, and it had to do with white people's responses to knowing that minority communities had a disproportionate higher rate of COVID. And here's what their conclusion was. And let me just read it. It's quick. It says here, the researchers found that white Americans who believe that there to be greater racial disparities in COVID-19 were less fearful of the disease and less likely to support safety precautions. In contrast, participants who acknowledged the structural causes contributing to these disparities were more fearful and supportive of safety measures. Now, I read the study, and this study is just a bunch of mush. You want to talk about conspiracy theories? Take a look at this study. These conclusions are not conclusions. So could be, maybe, could be. But the problem is how the media runs with this. So what it is, these universities feed the media half-truths, and then the media just forms their own conclusion. So what this study did is it said, well, if I tell a white person that there's a higher proportion of COVID in minority communities, they are less fearful of the disease. Well, think about it. If you're telling me that it affects another element of society at a higher rate, and I'm not part of that element of society, well, it makes me think that COVID will affect me less, which is reasonable. But not according to this study. There's something wrong with that. Now, here's where they really make the jump that's bizarre. It's that second, and let me read this again. It says, the researchers found that white Americans who believe that there to be greater racial disparity in COVID-19 were less fearful of the disease. Okay, that makes sense. That's rational. And less likely to support safety precautions. That's where they're jumping through hoops in this study to come to that conclusion. What they're trying to make you believe is that, well, white people, when they find out that minority communities get hit harder by COVID, well, we don't care about them. So I'm not for safety precautions. Don't waste your time reading the study. I read the study. They jump through hoops to come to these conclusions. And none of their conclusions are solid. It's also could be, can be, maybe. Nothing definitive. But look what the media does with this. And this is an article from the St. Louis American. Let me just read you the headlines. The headline says, many white people cared less about COVID-19 as black communities struggled. So now we've got a lot of these universities on board with this pseudoscience to create and continue a narrative that white people are racist, that they don't care about black people. All right, enough of that. The Democrats know, and the people in government know, that the Democratic Party needs the African American vote in November to even have a chance. And they're going to continue to create these false narratives about white supremacy and how white people hate black people, and subconsciously white people are haters of black people. They're all doing this to gin up the African American vote. Because in the polls, Democrats are losing the African-American vote. There's not a poll out there that says that they are gaining with African-Americans, particularly African-American men, who, in my opinion, have been screwed by the Democratic Party forever. And I think you're seeing African-American men leave the Democratic Party. But the media, the Democrats, those in power right now in Washington, they're going to continue pushing this narrative to drive a wedge between black and white Americans. So just be prepared for it. It's going to continue until November. Okay, let's switch to a tale of two cities, a tale of two governors. Ron DeSantis of Florida and Phil Murphy of New Jersey. In one corner, we have Ron DeSantis, who pushes anti-grooming legislation. And in the other corner, you have Phil Murphy, who is pushing kids to pornographic sites, 9-year-olds to pornographic sites. But today, Murphy ordered the review of the new New Jersey sex education standards that sparked uproar. Says Governor Murphy announced Wednesday he ordered the State Department of Education to review sex education standards New Jersey adopted 2 years ago, for the guidelines sparked an uproar among parents and Republican officials in recent days. Shocking. After you find out what these new rules and regulations allow a 9-year-old kid to do, you should be shocked too. And here's what gets me with Murphy. Murphy lashed out at his critics, who he said have distorted what is actually included in the guidelines. He said, unfortunately, our learning standards have been intentionally misrepresented by some politicians seeking to divide and score political points. You make the decision on your own. I'm just going to read a quote here from one of the assembly people, Shapizi from New Jersey. Her name is, State Senator Holly Shapizi, Republican. Let me just read this quote. While some of the lessons I agree with, many are completely overboard with cringy detail for young kids, and some go as far as unnecessarily sexualizing children further. For me, the most outrageous part are teachers are instructed to promote a website called Amaze and its YouTube channel to kids as young as 9 for them to get additional information on sex ed. One of the very first videos posted normalizes porn as something everyone watches. And hey, it's free. Now, I got to tell you, I went on to this Amaze, and let me tell you, do not watch this with your mother. It's embarrassing. It's porn, and it's something a 9-year-old should not be watching. But again, it matters. It matters who your governor is. It matters who your president is. It matters who's on your board of education. Now, I was happy to hear up in Loudoun County in Virginia, the new governor had amended a law that said that all 9 members of the Loudoun County Board of Education will be up for election come November midterm elections. And you remember Loudoun County. That's the school board that was teaching critical race theory, that refused to comply with the governor's ban on masks in school, and essentially was protecting a transgender student that raped 2 other students. Do you remember that he had raped, or she had raped one student at one school? They switched him to another school without telling anybody. And then the kid proceeded to rape another student. Well, I find it funny that those senators that are in the contested states in the upcoming election are now suddenly pro Title 42. Now, remember, I mentioned in my last episode, Title 42 prevented people that were applying for asylum in the United States from staying in the country. They would have to stay outside the country in Mexico or anywhere else, but they couldn't stay in the United States. And this was implemented by Donald Trump, but Joe Biden's administration is going to allow it to expire. So now we're hearing some pushback from, Kelly from Arizona, Hassan from New Hampshire, Warnock from Georgia, and Bennett from Colorado. So they're pushing back, saying, "Oh, maybe we can do something here. Maybe we can extend it a little longer, whatever." And these are 4 seats that the Republicans could take. Now, I think Kelly is weak. I think Warnock is weak. I think of all the 4 that I mentioned, Warnock is going to get beat by Herschel Walker. Then I think Kelly is the most vulnerable. I think Hassan is vulnerable next, and then Bennett in Colorado is vulnerable. But right now, I rank it as Warnock and Kelly will get beat, Hassan, and then Bennett in Colorado. Bennett's loss in Colorado could be a surprise. He may lose by a lot, and that wouldn't surprise me. But right now, I think he's at the bottom of the list. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is Trump's endorsement of Dr. Oz. I can't quite figure out why he endorsed Dr. Oz. He just doesn't seem MAGA. This thing just came out of the blue. Now, I'm not thrilled with the other candidate, too, David McCormick. So apparently polls are saying it's between Oz and McCormick. Now, McCormick's some type of Wall Streeter, and, again, I'm not so sure he's 100% MAGA, but Dr. Oz? I'm not sure where that was coming from Trump. Now, I'm a Trump supporter. I don't agree with everything that he says, and I don't agree with this Dr. Oz endorsement. So we shall see. Okay, this is breaking news. The Twitter board just announced that it is going to take a poison pill strategy to prevent or at least delay Elon Musk's purchase of the company. Now, this poison pill will last for a year, so it's set to expire a year from now. And again, the purpose of this is just to make it more difficult for Musk to purchase this company. So we shall see. It's going to be interesting. I'm waiting to see how Musk is going to counter this. Now let's go to stocks. Earlier in the week, I had mentioned that there was many items on the economic calendar that could have a significant impact on the market, and it all had to revolve around inflation. And I had mentioned earlier in the week that any surprises would have an adverse effect on the market, and there were a few surprises. And the first surprise was, although a slight surprise, it was CPI, the Consumer Price Index, came in at 8.5, whereas the consensus was an 8.4% year-over-year increase. The next item was the PPI. The consensus was 1.1, and 1.4% came in. And PPI is the Producer Price Index. So this is what the producers are paying for their items that are eventually going to be sold to you as a consumer. And finally, the Import Price Index came in at 2.6 when a 2.2% increase was the consensus. So with that said, the Dow was down on Thursday, wasn't trading on Friday for Good Friday, but the Dow was down 0.33% for the day to 34,451.23. For the week, it was down 0.78%. Year to date, the Dow is down 5.19%. The S&P was down on Thursday 1.21% to 4392.59. For the week, it was down 2.13%. And for the year, it is down 7.84%. And finally, NASDAQ was down for the day 2.14% to 13,351.08. For the week, it was down 2.63%. And for the year, it's down 14.66%. Oil was up 2.2% to $106.54 per barrel. The 10-year bond hit a 3-year high. It was up nearly 14 basis points to 2.827%. Spot gold was down 0.29% to $1,971.95 per ounce. And spot silver was down 0.62% to $25.56 per ounce. Bitcoin is trading at right now $40,413.12. Ethereum is trading at $3,031.33. And XRP is trading at 78 cents. And with that said, you have a good weekend, and thank you for listening, and I will see you on Tuesday.